Well, Rutgers is standing by former U of L Associate Athletic Director Julie Hermann as its newly hired athletic director. This in the face of allegations of verbal abuse from her time at the University of Tennessee's volleyball program. Over the weekend, the Newark Star-Ledger reported that some of Hermann's former players came forward alleging that she called them derogatory names. Hermann denies that she referred to her players any name calling, and a former assistant for Hermann at Tennessee came to her defense. Kim Tibbetts says she was in every huddle at every practice and never heard Hermann do any of the things described. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie now set to question Rutgers officials about the allegations, while other New Jersey politicians are calling for Hermann and the Rutgers president to resign. U of L Athletic Director Tom Jurich said of Hermann, in 15 and a half years, I've never had one problem. She did impeccable work for us. Jurich also told ESPN if Hermann did not remain at Rutgers, he would see what her future would be potentially at the University of Louisville, but was non-committal at best about her future. Jason Anderson from ESPN 680, as I am from ESPN 680, joins like afternoon and morning collide here on the CN2 desk. Let's start with this. Do you think Julie Hermann will keep her job, and should she keep her job?
I think it's going to become incredibly difficult for her to keep her job moving forward. Now you hear about Chris Christie getting involved. You get the political realm to start to get involved and start to put pressure on Rutgers University and some of those officials. And we saw what happened the last time when they did that with Tim Pernetti. Tim Pernetti, by all accounts, had an impeccable record at Rutgers, graduated from Rutgers, helped get them into the Big Ten. He even suspended Mike Rice, the basketball coach. Now, he didn't go far enough and fire him, but that even came out to say that Tim Pernetti was talked to by the legal staff at Rutgers and advised not to, that there were these hurdles they couldn't jump in terms of firing Mike Rice. So Pernetti decided we're going to go the route of suspending him. All of a sudden, the public opinion got involved, the political opinion got involved, and Tim Pernetti was let go. And now you've got the president for Rutgers that's simply saying, we're going to look at the entirety of the overall body of her career rather than just one simple mistake she may have made at Tennessee, which wasn't the way it was handled with Tim Pernetti. So that's going to be really interesting to see if they do it completely opposite with a guy that was their guy, graduated from Rutgers, got them into the Big Ten, or this person that's been there all of 10 minutes, if they reverse ship and go a completely different route.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, to me, the tough part of this is if you're Julie Hermann, you've done nothing wrong here. You know, people would say, well, she's lied. Well, you have to go back to the press conference to determine if she lied or was unprepared for the question to come up. As far as her standpoint, she hasn't said anything to Rutgers officials that they didn't ask her. I mean, they didn't ask her about these things. Nobody, frankly, knew about these things. I guess for her, I guess the question for all of us is, what's the next move in this? Right now, the president says she's staying. Of course, the president doesn't necessarily know if he's staying at this point. What do you think will be the next domino to fall in this thing?
I think it has a lot to do with some of the pressure that's being applied to Rutgers University. I mean, if the pressure becomes too hot and they've got to get out of the kitchen per se, which is what they did with Tim Pernetti, then I think there's a really, really strong possibility that Julie Hermann is out of a job at Rutgers. Even though, as you said, as far as making a mistake or an indiscretion at Rutgers, that didn't happen. This was 15, 16 years ago. People are allowed to evolve and become better people and learn from our mistakes. This is the one to where, as far as Rutgers University is concerned, this is a toxic issue. This is something that they just fired Mike Rice. The AD, as we've discussed, Tim Pernetti, was out for these quote-unquote abuses of players. And now you've got an athletic director that you look at and didn't know whether it was easily attainable, whether they didn't vet her enough, whether there was a lot of research to be done. Either way, this was found by the media or it was found by people that actually came forward. This information is now out there. And Rutgers as a university has egg on their face because they had Mike Rice and Tim Pernetti, and now they've got their athletic director that's involved, allegedly, 15, 16 years ago with something that they just fired two of their most notable employees at that school for doing. It's incredibly tough for Rutgers to be able to look at everybody and say what she's done is fine, even though she's kind of may have been not exactly truthful on knowing everything that she knew about the wedding and video and all those other things. But the next step, I think, is going to be interesting to see just how much pressure is applied to the president of Rutgers, because if there's a lot applied to him, it's going to be CYA, because it was CYA with firing Tim Pernetti. I think it might be CYA with firing Julie Hermann, too.
Well, and the thing with Julie Hermann, she certainly has not committed a fireable offense. They would certainly owe her, the full buyout, which is said to be $2.5 million. I would think if they did fire her, or didn't hire her, whatever the case may be, bought her out before she even starts, I think then you probably, without being a lawyer, look at some sort of legal action that now they have made her unhireable for athletic. Who's going to hire her if they do this to her and she hasn't really done anything to warrant being fired.
Well, the other thing that would be probably going in her favor is the president of Rutgers. If they fire Julie Hermann and this $2.5 million buyout is then given to her, if you're members of the board, if you're alumni, if you're anybody that's donating, that's a donor or anything like that, that's part of this big booster for Rutgers, and you look at the president and say, you fired the athletic director, you fired the coach, you hired this person, and now before she can even do anything on the job, you're paying her $2.5 million to walk away. What are you doing? How are you still in charge of this university? And I think this might be to where if one ship goes down, both of them go down. So if Hermann ends up losing her job, it probably won't come from the president. It may come from the board of directors above the president that say, you know what? Both of you can go ahead and find new employment
it's two or
somewhere
nothing
else.
to me in this one. If she goes down, then they say, okay, the person that hired her in charge of that has to go down, and vice versa. If he goes down, her support at that point is eroded. She's the only person, he was the only person that was in her corner, at least at that point during the hiring process. Now, I think the other question is, you see the headlines. All the headlines say, so-and-so or Julie Hermann accused of abuse. We saw the video of Mike Rice, and we've seen the video of what Mike Rice did. He was firing balls at players. My goodness, there was even a Saturday Night Live skit throwing toasters at players, mocking this sort of thing. But this, these things, this is abusive. This is shoving players. This is getting their face. To me, how did both... I guess at Rutgers, both fall under the same umbrella. These seem like far, even if the acts were true, different acts.
I would agree with you. I think they are completely on opposite sides of the spectrum if you're talking about, if you cross the line of abuse, how far down the road do you get? Mike Rice was a pretty long trip into this road of abuse. And I think we have to keep in also is the time of when this happened at Tennessee. Julie Hermann is not talked about, quote unquote, abuse that we're using here a couple of years ago in today's day and age, in today's vernacular of what is abuse, which is Mike Rice, which is things that are going on, and also which would be considered what Julie Hermann was doing in terms of derogatorily talking to her players and putting them down, calling them mentally disabled, making them do some different things, calling them, certain names as well. Back in the 90s, when this was going on, while it may not be right, we look back and say, thank goodness we've evolved and moved on as a people, as a culture, as a sports culture, that we've grown from this and we no longer look at that as acceptable behavior. But back in the 90s, when this was happening, it wasn't viewed as that. I mean, Bob Knight would do that to the media in press conferences, that when this was going on, in terms of abuse, I don't know that it was abuse back in the 90s. In terms of abuse now, I think, yes, it definitely falls under the umbrella. It's two different time periods in terms of sports culture. And I think she's being held up to the standards of today with what she did back in the late 90s.
I think this would be, either way, no matter what happens, if she is fired or not hired or bought out, if you want to term it, a big blow to women athletic officials who hope to rise to this job. She had risen to, this is a big-time job, going into a big-time era in their program in the Big Ten at Rutgers. This would be a big blow, one would think, to female, not that this is a female problem, but for people that look to role models in women's athletic positions, this would be a big blow.
It's a good point. I mean, she was just the third athletic director at a Division I school to be a female. And, there's a number of females, whether they're working in higher education, whether they're working in athletics, whether they're coaches or not, that look up to people that are kind of those barnstormers or those trailblazers, if you will, that can really set the path for others behind them. And this is one that, unfortunately, may get stopped before it even gets started, and what was looked at as kind of a badge of honor of, hey, there's another one. If you're a lady out there, a female, just like me, that's going in and as an athletic director, I can do that as well. And now you see all these things that are happening before, and she may end up losing her job. It's incredibly disappointing and probably disheartening as well that would take place with somebody that you thought had the opportunity to really, take that to the next level, that gender equity in terms of college athletics.